and it is going to be fought on the 32nd parallel in Korea. I thought it was in Jerusalem. He's changed the place. But that's what he believes. That's what he teaches. So you listen to that night and day, night and day, night and day. That gets you. But they do a second thing, which I attempted to do at the beginning of this meeting. Give you lots of sweets. Coffee will help. Why? Because it lowers your intellectual abilities. You deprive a person of protein, they can't be critical in their thinking about what you have to say. And so you go to the Mooney camp, and you get all those sweets. Watermelon, fresh watermelon, yum. But in all the time that you're eating and consuming, you are really working against your own basic functioning as a critical human being. And so as an adult, it's easier to wear you down. They take the very brightest young people from this society, from university campuses, and they ship them off to these little camps, and before you know it, they got little moons running around. But that's indoctrination at a very direct level. With a Jehovah's Witness, we do it great, actually. We study with you. We show how much we love and care for you. And entrap you. Okay. Moving on to persecution. If you look at the groups, persecution is a big thing. Catholics won't talk much about persecution. Once in a while in this country they become upset because, well, the media is making fun of them. But you know, we have that many millions of members, you really can't be that persecuted. Okay. Or you hear the evangelicals, which make up about 80 million people in this country. Oh man, their way of life is threatened. In fact, it's so threatened that we just built a $20 to $30 million church out here to have 15 to 20,000 people come and listen to me preach every Sunday about how persecuted we are. You're persecuted, I would suggest. And by the way, persecution complex is a great thing for a religion. Don't get me wrong. Jehovah's Witnesses in preaching in the 1930s in Kentucky, one of the more rational states, right? would go into a community and they would leave the city castrated, tarred, and feathered. That's a little bit of persecution. Now we're talking about real stuff. Yeah. By the way, atheists have not gone unscathed in this department. But that's an example of persecution. I always tell these people, when you are like your proclaimed Peter, the founder, the rock, and you're hanged upside down in the middle of Rome, on a crucifix like your so-called Savior, then I'll tell you, you are being persecuted. Until then, you don't have a problem, because you still got your coffers full. Persecution complex. Then we move to apocalyptic nature. Now, especially found in groups, beginning. Remember, Jesus was an apocalyptic person. He taught the end of the world, but it just didn't happen in his time. It didn't happen in Paul's time. It didn't happen in Peter's time. Actually, it didn't happen. So we keep moving the goalpost. So Jehovah's Witnesses, 1800s, Pastor Russell came out with a wonderful series of books called The Studies in the Scriptures. And he prophesied. In October 1914, yes, October 18th to be exact. It's going to happen. The end of the world. There's a wonderful book written by a Jehovah's Witness by the name of Harold Macmillan. Harold Macmillan wrote a book called Faith on the March. He said he woke up, he looked out, and thought, this is it. Today, Jesus is coming. At 6 p.m., Jesus hadn't arrived. Midnight, Jesus hadn't arrived. Something went wrong. How are we going to get out of this mess and keep all those people? Now, I'm not so cynical as to believe that they actually sit down and plot. Maybe. But this is what they did. They had a publication at the time called the Emphatic Dialogue. They looked up in there and they saw Greek and they saw English, and the Greek word for coming, Jesus is coming, the word parousia, could be translated as Jesus is present. Present. Oh, so it's not a physical coming on the clouds, but he's going to be present. It is a spiritual thing. No wonder we didn't see Jesus on the 18th. He was here all along, we just weren't aware of it. And if you look at all the apocalyptic cults and religious groups, eventually they move to that kind of line of thinking, don't they? They have to move there, because it just doesn't happen. So, how do we treat people within the group? We do isolationism. You try to isolate people as much as possible from the real world. And the younger the group is, the more isolationist they're going to be. The more they're going to want you to read their literature and confine you. Again, it's a little bit difficult for a Catholic Church to do because they're beyond that kind of stage, in a sense. They may put out the list of bad movies or books or whatever, but nobody pays attention to it. With a witness or with smaller groups, they know when you're reading. They have eyes everywhere. You know, they're going to catch you one way or another. I already mentioned the next one, which is New Teachings and Revelations. You come to New Teachings and Revelations to explain those failures that you've already had. Jesus didn't come, so now we have New Teachings, New Revelations, Mormon Church, Church of the Latter-day Saints. Dark people, according to the Book of Mormon, may not be involved in the priesthood of the church. They're second class, maybe even third class, but they're not citizens of our church. Until, of course, the head of the church, 1960s, late 60s, gets a divine revelation. And it says, the civil rights movement is hitting Washington and we better get on the bandwagon. So now dark people, they can become part of the faithful priesthood. All this has to do then with maturity in terms of separation. All of this has to do with that. When we come to the next characteristic, we look at the non-verifiable belief system, and I've already touched on that very briefly. Because if it's a revelation to a leader, Joseph Smith, he has the golden tablets. The angels are helping him translate these. And then they're gone. Who saw it? Joseph and the angel. How do I disprove that? Other than the fact that it's probably one of the most illiterate books written by a man, or by a hand in the world. And if you hear the voice of God, it's very difficult to prove that I don't hear the voice of God. Yeah, I went through some things in my deconversion process. They were pretty scary at times. But I found science could rationally explain crazy things.